This story is titled Paid for Sister's Engagement Party, only to find out my parents and my sister uninvited me, so I canceled everything. Now they are begging. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hey, so I guess I'll just jump into it. My name's Lauren, and I've always been the invisible one in my family. Like, you know that kid in the background of every photo who's holding the snacks or cleaning up the mess while everyone else is celebrating? Yeah, that was me. And honestly, it all started when my little sister Amber I was 5 when she came into the picture. And before that, I thought life was fine. I was just a kid, drawing on walls, watching cartoons, and getting all the hugs and bedtime stories. Then, Amber showed up, and suddenly, it was like someone turned off the spotlight on me. Everything became about her. At first, I thought, okay, babies are cute. They need a lot of attention, right? But this wasn't normal new baby stuff. My parents didn't just love Amber. They worshipped her. Mom would hold her up and say, "Look at our little star." Dad would beam like she'd just cured cancer. Meanwhile, I was over there like, hello? I drew this picture of a dinosaur. And my mom would glance at it and go, "That's nice, honey," before cooing over Amber's ability to burp on command. By the time Amber was 3, she was the star of every family event. She took up ballet, and Mom would invite everyone over to watch her spin around in a tutu. I swear every single one of my relatives has a video on their phones of Amber doing some twirl in the living room while I'm in the corner, setting out cups of juice. "Lauren, help me with this," Mom would say, not even looking up as I passed out napkins and plates. The thing is, Amber was genuinely good at stuff. She was always picked first for talent shows or school plays. It was like she was born with this magnet that just pulled everyone in. And me? I was just there. I didn't hate her or anything. I just felt like I didn't exist. But it wasn't just the family stuff. It was everyday life too. Like, I'd come home from school ready to tell my parents about getting an A on my science project, and before I could even open my mouth, Mom would be like, "Lauren, take Amber outside to practice her cartwheels." No, "Hi, how was your day?" Or, "Great job on your project." Just, "Go help Amber." And then there were the chores. Oh my God, the chores. I don't think Amber even knew where we kept the broom. If there were dishes in the sink, they were mine to clean. Laundry piling up? Guess whose job that was? I started learning how to cook at 8 because Mom was always too busy taking Amber to dance class. "You're the big sister," she'd say. "You need to set an example." It wasn't like I wanted a parade for folding socks, but it would have been nice to at least feel noticed. The only time anyone paid attention to me was when something went wrong. If Amber spilled juice on the carpet, it was because I didn't watch her closely enough. If she scraped her knee, it was because I wasn't careful. I don't know how I managed to be blamed for things even when I wasn't in the room. One day, my teacher called home to tell my parents I'd been helping other kids with their math homework. I guess she thought they'd be proud or something. Instead, when I got home, my mom just said, "That's nice. Did you remember to clean the bathroom today?" Like, are you kidding me? The bathroom? The only real escape I had was school. I threw myself into my classes and signed up for as many clubs as I could. Anything to stay out of the house. I even started going to the library after school just to avoid the constant, "Lauren, can you do this for Amber?" Amber, meanwhile, was getting awards left and right. She had this shelf in the living room just for her trophies and medals. Dance competitions, talent shows, even some random art contest she entered once. If she so much as sneezed, Mom and Dad were clapping. And if I said anything about it, I was being negative or not supportive. One Christmas, I remember asking for a set of colored pencils because I loved drawing. When I unwrapped my gift, it was a pack of basic pencils. You know, the kind you'd find in a classroom supply box. Amber, on the other hand, got a brand new ballet bar and a custom leotard with her name embroidered on it. I don't even think she said thank you. The worst part was, Amber wasn't even mean about it. Like, she wasn't a bully or anything. She just existed. And everyone else acted like that was enough. She didn't have to try. She didn't have to work. Everything was handed to her because she was Amber. I remember one time when I was about 12, I asked my mom why Amber never had to do chores. Mom just shrugged and said, "She's so busy with her activities. You're good at keeping things in order, Lauren." That was it. No discussion, no consideration that maybe I was tired too. Alright, so by the time I was 13, I'd pretty much accepted my role as the family sidekick. I wasn't the star, not even close. Amber was the sun, and I was, like, the distant planet just orbiting around her. It wasn't fair, but what could I do? Then one day, this opportunity came up at school. Our history teacher announced this weekend trip to the state capitol. It was this big thing where we'd visit museums, the old courthouse, and even meet some local officials. They only picked a handful of kids, and somehow I made the cut. I was so excited I thought I'd explode. When I got home, I handed Mom the permission slip and started rambling about how amazing the trip was going to be. She barely looked up from her tablet. That's nice, she said. Nice, I said, practically bouncing. Mom, this is huge! We're staying overnight in a hotel, and we get to visit the governor's mansion. They even said we'll get to see the archives. She finally glanced at the paper and frowned. Lauren, this is next weekend. Yeah, I know. She shook her head and set the paper down on the counter. You can't go. Just like that, all my excitement deflated. What? Why not? Amber's got her gymnastics meet next weekend, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. We'll need your help with costumes and snacks. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But she was serious. Mom, this is a school trip. It's educational. Can't you handle Amber's meet without me for once? She sighed like I was being unreasonable. Lauren, don't be selfish. Amber needs you. Dad chimed in from the living room, not even looking away from the TV. Your sister's got a real future ahead of her, Lauren. You should be proud to support her. Proud? Was I supposed to feel proud packing granola bars and sewing sequins onto leotards? But this is important to me, I said, my voice cracking. Mom waved me off. You can go next time. There was no next time. The trip only happened every few years, and by the time it came around again, I'd be in high school. But they didn't care. They never cared. That weekend, while my classmates were taking selfies in front of historic landmarks, I was sitting on a metal bench in a crowded gymnasium, watching Amber do flips while Mom and Dad cheered like she was competing in the Olympics. I wanted to scream. Amber ended up winning a little medal for her age group. Mom made me take pictures of her holding it, grinning ear to ear. Isn't she amazing? Mom said, nudging me. Yeah, I muttered. Amazing. It wasn't long after that when Amber's gymnastics career hit a wall. She was practicing some complicated routine during class and fell off the beam. The crack her wrist made when she hit the floor still makes me cringe. Mom rushed her to the ER, and they came home with Amber's arm in a cast and a long list of instructions from the doctor. The fracture wasn't the worst part, though. The doctor said Amber might never fully regain her flexibility. Gymnastics was off the table, at least competitively. You'd think that would have been enough of a blow, but somehow my parents managed to make it worse. Mom was in tears, pacing around the living room. What are we going to do now? Gymnastics was her whole future. Dad sat in his chair, rubbing his temples. This is a disaster. I was in the kitchen trying to do homework when Mom stormed in. Lauren, this is your fault. I blinked at her, completely stunned. What? You should have been supervising her warm-ups, she said, her voice sharp. I dropped my pencil. I wasn't even there. Exactly, she snapped. You should have been there to help her, but no, you're always so focused on yourself. This family is falling apart, and you're just sitting there doing homework like nothing happened. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't like I could argue. They never listened anyway. Dad piled on, of course. Maybe if you spent less time complaining and more time being part of this family, Amber wouldn't have gotten hurt. And that was it. I was grounded for a month. No TV, no phone, no hanging out with friends. Not that I had many to begin with. My world became school, chores, and the constant guilt trip from my parents. Amber, meanwhile, milked her injury for all it was worth. She'd lounge on the couch with her cast propped up, barking orders like, Lauren, can you get me some water? Or, Mom, tell Lauren to help me with my homework. I tried not to hate her for it. She was just doing what she'd always done, letting everyone cater to her. It wasn't her fault our parents treated her like royalty and me like the help, but that didn't make it any easier to swallow. The only escape I had was Mia's parents' bakery in our town that has a cozy and quiet environment. Mia and I would hang out there after school, helping out with small stuff like folding boxes or sweeping floors. Her parents, Scott and Donna, were the kind of people who actually noticed things. Like, if I looked tired, Donna would ask if I'd eaten. If I did something well, Scott would give me a nod and say, "Good work, kid." It was such a small thing, but it meant everything to me. They made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than just someone's backup plan. The thing is, my parents could have been like that if they'd tried, but they didn't. They were so busy propping up Amber that they couldn't see me standing right in front of them, drowning in their expectation. I stopped expecting things to get better. If they hadn't noticed me by now, they never would. By the time I hit 18, I was just going through the motions. I didn't really talk to my parents unless I had to, and I spent as much time as possible at school, the library, or Mia's family's bakery. Home didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place I was stuck in until I could figure out how to leave. Senior year rolled around, and for the first time in forever, I felt a little bit of hope. I'd been working my butt off in school, and it finally paid off when I got accepted to a state university. It wasn't some Ivy League or anything, but it was solid, and it felt like my ticket out. Plus, I got a partial scholarship. Not enough to cover everything, but it was a start. I waited until dinner to bring it up because I figured that was the best chance to get their attention. Dad was carving up some roast chicken, and Amber was scrolling through her phone like always. I slid the acceptance letter across the table. "I got in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom glanced at it, then looked back at her plate. "That's nice, Lauren." Nice? I had worked for years to make this happen, and all I got was nice? I pushed forward anyway. "It's not too expensive. I've already got a scholarship that covers part of the tuition. I just need a little help with the rest." Mom sighed, the way she always did when I asked for anything. "We're not taking out loans, Lauren." "I'm not asking for loans," I said quickly. "I just need some help up front. I'll pay it all back. I'll even sign something if you want." Dad finally looked up. "College isn't for everyone, Lauren. Some people are better off getting jobs right away." Amber snickered, barely looking up from her phone. "Yeah, maybe you should have thought of that before wasting all that time on homework." I clenched my fists under the table. "This isn't a waste of time. I've already done the math. I'll graduate, get a job, and pay you back. I just need a little help to get started." Mom shook her head. "We don't have the money, Lauren. You need to be realistic. Maybe there's a job at the mall or something. Plenty of people do fine without college." I stared at my untouched plate, fighting back tears. They had the money. I knew they did. Amber's gymnastics lessons weren't cheap, and neither were the endless art supplies and piano lessons they bought her after she quit gymnastics. But when it came to me, nothing. After dinner, I went to the bakery, hoping Mia would be there. I needed someone to vent to before I exploded. She was wiping down the counter when I walked in, and the second she saw my face, she knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, putting down the rag. I slumped onto a stool and told her everything. How I got into college, how I just needed a little help, and how my parents basically told me to get lost. "I did everything right," I said, my voice cracking. "Straight A's, all the extracurriculars, and they don't even care." Mia didn't say anything right away, which was weird for her. Usually she had something sarcastic or funny to say to cheer me up, but this time she just nodded. "Hang on," she said, disappearing into the back room. A few minutes later, she came back with her parents. They had always been kind to me, but I wasn't expecting what came next. "Lauren," Donna said, sitting down across from me, "Mia told us what's going on. We want to help." I started shaking my head. "No, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," Scott interrupted. "We're offering. You've been part of this bakery for years, and we've watched how hard you work. You deserve this chance." Donna nodded. "We'll cover your tuition. You'll work here part-time after classes, and you can pay us back when you're able. No interest, no rush." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people weren't even related to me, and they were willing to do more for me than my own parents ever had. Tears started streaming down my face, and for the first time in a long time, they weren't from anger or frustration. They were from relief. That night, I went home and packed my things. I didn't make a big announcement or anything. I just quietly filled a couple of bags with clothes and essentials. The acceptance letter went on top, like a reminder that I was finally getting out. When I left the next morning, my parents barely noticed. Mom was busy making breakfast for Amber, and Dad was already halfway out the door for work. Amber didn't even look up from her phone. College felt like stepping into a whole new world. It wasn't perfect. I had to juggle classes, part-time work at the bakery, and the general stress of being broke most of the time. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up after anyone else or getting blamed for things I didn't do. I could finally just focus on me. My dorm was nothing fancy. It was small, the mattress was lumpy, and my roommate Steph had a habit of blasting country music at random hours. But we got along well enough. She was a freshman like me, and we bonded over late-night study sessions and cheap takeout. We weren't exactly best friends, but it was nice having someone to talk to who didn't see me as Amber's sister. Classes were no joke. I'd always been a good student, but college was on another level. I was majoring in business administration, which sounded kind of boring at first, but the more I got into it, the more it clicked. A lot of the stuff we learned about, budgeting, organization, problem solving, reminded me of what I'd been doing at the bakery. Only now I was learning how to take it to the next level. Speaking of the bakery, it was still a big part of my life. I worked there a few evenings a week and most weekends, handling everything from taking orders to managing inventory. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I felt like I was really contributing to something meaningful. Plus, the regulars were always fun to chat with. There was Mr. Peters, who came in every Saturday for a black coffee and a cinnamon roll, and the group of college kids who swore by our blueberry muffins. One day, Scott called me into the back office. My first thought was, oh God, what did I mess up? But instead of being in trouble, he handed me a clipboard and said, "You've been doing a great job, Lauren. We're thinking of expanding our catering business, and we want you to manage it." I stared at him, completely stunned. "Me? Manage it? You're organized, reliable, and you've got a good head for numbers," he said. "We trust you." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever trusted me with something so big before. "I won't let you down," I said, and I meant it. Taking on the catering business was a challenge, but it also felt like a turning point. I threw myself into it, creating schedules, managing orders, and even helping with marketing. I designed a flyer that we put up around campus, and within a few weeks we started getting calls for small events, study groups, club meetings, stuff like that. It wasn't huge, but it was a start, and every successful event felt like a win. Meanwhile, my classes started to make more sense too. Concepts that seemed abstract at first, like supply chain management or financial forecasting, started to click when I applied them to the bakery. I'd sit in lectures and think, oh, this is just like what I did with the catering schedule last week. It was like everything I was learning had a real-world application, and that made it so much easier to stay motivated. Of course, things weren't perfect. There were nights when I barely got any sleep because I was finishing an assignment or prepping for a catering event. And there were times when I felt completely burned out, questioning if all this effort was even worth it. But then I'd remind myself of why I was doing it. I wasn't just working toward a degree or a paycheck. I was building a life where I didn't have to rely on anyone else, where I didn't have to be anyone's doormat. Back home, things were distant. My parents rarely called, and when they did, the conversations were short and superficial. "How's school?" Mom would ask. And before I could answer, she'd launch into a story about Amber. That Thanksgiving, I went home for dinner out of obligation more than anything. Amber was sitting at the table, flipping through photos on her phone while Mom bustled around, making sure everyone knew about Amber's newest art classes. I tried to tune it out, focusing on the mashed potatoes on my plate. But then Mom said something that made me freeze. "We've been saving for years to make sure Amber can go to the college of her choice." I stared at her, my fork hovering midair. "You've been saving for Amber's college?" Mom looked up, confused. "Of course. We've always wanted to give her the best opportunities." The best opportunities. Right. The same parents who told me to get a job at the mall when I needed help for my tuition. The same people who couldn't be bothered to care about my grades or my plans. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't trust myself to speak without losing it. I finished my dinner in silence, the sounds of my family's laughter and chatter grating against my nerves. Amber, of course, looked pleased with herself, like it was only natural that our parents would prioritize her. That night, back in my childhood bedroom, I made a decision. If my parents didn't care enough about me to invest in my future, then fine. I wouldn't waste another ounce of emotional energy on them. From now on, our relationship would be strictly transactional. They didn't see me as their daughter, so I wouldn't act like one. It was easier than I thought to detach. The highlight of my sophomore year came when I crossed paths with Mr. Wallace. Well, he showed up one evening, looking as sharp as ever in his tailored suit that screamed business. He ordered his usual coffee and muffin, and as I rang him up, he smiled and said, "Lauren, right?" I blinked. Yeah, that's me." He nodded. "You've done a great job with this place. I've been watching how smoothly everything runs here, and it's impressive." "Thanks," I said, a little flustered. "It's a team effort, though." "Still," he said, handing me his card again. "We're always looking for smart, hardworking people at my firm. If you're interested, give me a call when you graduate." I tucked the card into my pocket, my mind racing. A part of me wanted to jump on the opportunity right then and there, but I reminded myself that I still had 2 years of school left. Still, the fact that someone like him saw potential in me felt like a validation of everything I'd been working toward. By the end of sophomore year, I'd paid back every cent Scott and Donna had loaned me for tuition. It felt amazing to hand them that final check, knowing I'd kept my promise. For so long, I'd been chasing validation from my parents, trying to prove I was worth something. But now I realized I didn't need their approval. I had people in my life who saw my value, and that was enough. By the time I hit junior year, I was cruising. Not in an easy way. Life was still busy and exhausting, but I had found my rhythm. Classes were going well, I was making good money at the bakery, and the idea of a real future didn't seem so far away anymore. That's why it caught me off guard when my parents called one evening. I debated ignoring it, but something told me to pick up. "Hi, Mom," I said, bracing myself for whatever Amber-related update was coming. "Oh, Lauren," she said, her voice shaky, like she'd been crying. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" "It's just," she sighed heavily. "Your dad made some bad investments, and things are tight right now. We're struggling to cover the bills." I blinked, unsure of what to say. My parents had never been the type to admit they were struggling. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said cautiously. We were hoping you could help, she said quickly, just until we get back on our feet. You've always been so responsible, and we know you're doing well now. There it was. They didn't care how I was doing or what I'd been through to get to this point. They just wanted something from me. What kind of help are you talking about? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Maybe you could set up a credit card for us, she said. Just something small to cover groceries and utilities. Nothing extravagant, of course. I sat there, staring at the stack of textbooks on my desk. The nerve of them, asking me for money after everything they'd put me through. But at the same time, I thought about what it would mean to say no. It wasn't about Amber or their choices anymore. It was about me deciding whether or not I wanted to play this role in their lives. All right, I said finally. But it'll have limits. $1,500 a month and that's it. Groceries, utilities, and essentials only. Oh, thank you, sweetie, Mom gushed. You don't know how much this means to us. The gratitude in her voice sounded genuine, but I didn't let myself get too comfortable. I knew how this would go. Setting up the card wasn't hard. I linked it to my account, but I made sure to monitor it closely. The first few months went surprisingly well. The charges were small. Groceries, gas, the occasional dinner out at a mid-range restaurant. Nothing extravagant. For a moment, I thought maybe things would actually be different this time. Mom started calling more often, usually to give me updates about their expenses. We're keeping it really modest, she'd say. Just the basics. Sometimes the calls would veer off into her usual Amber updates, but I didn't engage much. Our relationship had become strictly about transactions, and I was okay with that. Amber, of course, wasn't thrilled about my involvement. Why does Lauren have to know everything? I overheard her snap on one of Mom's calls. Can't you just let me handle it? You don't even work, Mom shot back. It was one of the few times I felt a small sense of satisfaction listening to them argue. Months turned into a year, and I started to loosen my grip on the situation. The charges stayed consistent, and I barely noticed the money leaving my account. It wasn't like I was struggling. Plus, I still had Mr. Wallace's business card in my wallet, waiting for graduation day. I guess I let myself get too comfortable, though, because the first red flag showed up on a random Tuesday. I was reviewing the credit card statement, like I did every month, and noticed a charge for $600 at some boutique clothing store. I called Mom immediately. What's this? Oh, that's just a little something for Amber, she said, like it was no big deal. She needed a new outfit for an event. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, this card is for necessities, not clothes. She's meeting Ryan's parents this weekend, Mom argued. She has to make a good impression. Ryan was Amber's new boyfriend, the latest in a long line of people my parents were enamored with. I hadn't met him, but based on Mom's endless gushing, he came from some wealthy family that owned luxury car dealerships. I just let it go. After my graduation, landing the job at Mr. Wallace's firm felt like stepping into another world. It was corporate, sure, but it wasn't stuffy. They respected my ideas, gave me projects that mattered, and paid me a salary I never dreamed I'd see. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scraping by. I could afford nice things, a reliable car, new clothes that didn't come from clearance racks, and even a sleek little apartment in the city. Word got back to my parents, of course. Mom called me not even a week after I started the job. Her tone so sweet it almost made my teeth hurt. Lauren, honey, we're just so proud of you. A big job at such a respectable company. We always knew you'd go far. Uh-huh, I said, skeptical. I'd learned to read between the lines by now. We've just been thinking, she continued, her voice getting that fake casual tone that always meant trouble. Now that you're doing so well, maybe we could increase the card limit? Just a little, you know, for emergencies. How much is a little? I asked, already dreading the answer. Well, $2,500 seems reasonable, don't you think? Groceries are getting more expensive and Amber's art classes aren't cheap. There it was. It wasn't about groceries or utilities. It was about Amber. It was always about Amber. No, I said flatly. Mom laughed nervously, like she thought I was joking. Lauren, don't be so stingy. You're making plenty now. We're family. Exactly, I said. Which is why I'm already giving you $1,500 a month. That's more than enough for necessities. She didn't argue outright, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice when she said, all right, if that's how you feel. I thought that was the end of it, but the entitlement only grew. Suddenly, every phone call was about how much I was thriving and how proud they were of me, always followed by some not-so-subtle hints about what else I could do for them. It never stopped. They saw my success as their success, my money as their money. Every little thing they wanted, they framed as some kind of investment in Amber's future. And every time I shut it down. No, Mom. Sorry, Dad. That's not in the budget. I've already done more than enough. I could tell they hated hearing it, but I didn't care. I'd spent my entire life being their doormat, and I wasn't going back. By the time the betrayal hit, I should have seen it coming. I mean, how many chances can you give people before they show you who they really are? But even after everything, every ridiculous request, every guilt trip, I didn't expect it to be this bad. It started with a photo. I was at work, flipping through reports, when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was Amber's Instagram. Normally, I ignored her posts because they were always the same. Her posing in some expensive outfit or bragging about her latest achievement. But this one caught my eye because it was so over the top, even for her. The caption read, "Engaged, blessed to celebrate with family in Monaco, no grateful, talks family first." The picture was worse. Amber was standing on the deck of a luxury yacht, wrapped around some guy who I assumed was Ryan. My parents were there too, grinning like they'd just won the lottery. And to top it off, there were two other people I didn't recognize, probably Ryan's parents. The backdrop was pure Monaco, bright blue waters, sleek yachts, and the kind of skyline you only see in movies. My stomach sank as I kept scrolling through the post. It didn't take long to piece it together. They were on a week-long trip to Monaco, celebrating Amber and Ryan's engagement. My parents, Amber, Ryan, and his family, all living it up in one of the most expensive places on earth. And the best part? They'd done it all with my money. A quick check of my banking app confirmed it. First-class flights for 6 people, 18,000 euros. Yacht rental for the week, 25,000 euros. Dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, spa appointments, private tours of Monte Carlo. It added up to over 50,000 euros. I couldn't believe it. I'd given them a card for groceries and utilities, and they'd used it to fund a dream vacation to Monaco. A vacation I wasn't even invited to. I called Mom immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice annoyingly chipper. "Hi, sweetie. How's work? Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. I could hear faint music and waves in the background. "Oh, we're just taking a little break. You know how stressful things have been lately." "A little break?" I snapped. "You're in Monaco, with Ryan's family, using my money." The silence on her end was deafening. Finally, she muttered, "Lauren, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" My voice was shaking now. "You maxed out the card. You spent over 50,000 euros without telling me. On a trip I wasn't even invited to. You didn't need to be here," she said defensively. This was about Amber and Ryan. It's their moment. Before I could respond, I heard Amber's voice in the background. "Is that Lauren? Let me talk to her." There was some shuffling, and then Amber was on the line. "Lauren," she said, her tone dripping with annoyance. "Can you not ruin everything for once? This trip is important. Ryan's parents are here, and they need to see that we're a successful, supportive family." I laughed bitterly. "A successful family? You don't even have jobs. You're living off my money." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You make plenty. What's 50 grand to you? It's not like you're struggling. It's my money," I shot back. "And you didn't even ask." Amber didn't miss a beat. "Well, maybe if you weren't so bitter all the time, we'd include you. But honestly, you don't fit in here. You just make it awkward." My jaw dropped. "Awkward? I'm the reason you're even on this trip. You couldn't afford this if it weren't for me." "Exactly," Amber said coldly. "That's all you're good for. You're not part of this family. You're just a wallet." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone, my chest tight with anger and disbelief. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the fact that they didn't even see me as a person. To them, I was just a tool they could use and discard when they were done. I opened the banking app again, my hands shaking. With every click, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. First, I canceled the yacht rental, then the spa appointments, private tours, and the Michelin-starred dinners. Finally, I canceled their return flights. I didn't stop there. I deactivated the card entirely, making sure they wouldn't be able to charge another penny. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. My phone blew up within an hour. Mom, Dad, Amber, and even Ryan were calling nonstop. Mom's voicemail was full of fake sweetness. "Lauren, honey, please call me back. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding." Dad's tone was more threatening. "Fix this now, young lady. You're embarrassing the family." Amber, of course, went straight to insults. "You better undo whatever you just did, or I swear to God, Lauren, you'll regret it." Ryan even left a message. "I don't know what's going on, but you need to call us back immediately." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I blocked their numbers and logged out of social media for the night. The next morning, I scrolled through Instagram and wasn't surprised to see Amber's latest post. She'd uploaded a long rant about toxic siblings and how I'd ruined her engagement trip out of jealousy. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. Her friends chimed in with supportive messages like, "What kind of sister does that?" and "You're better off without her." But I wasn't about to let her control the narrative. I posted my own response, complete with screenshots of the charges and the messages they'd sent me. So yes, I canceled everything. Actions have consequences. It didn't take long for the tide to turn. People started calling Amber out for her entitlement, and some even shared my post. By the end of the day, her comment section was full of strangers telling her to grow up. Through mutual friends, I found out what happened next. Without the yacht or their first-class flights, my family was forced to scramble. They ended up booking economy seats on a budget airline and staying at some low-end motel for the rest of the trip. As for Ryan's parents, they were furious. They'd thought my parents were well off, only to find out the entire trip was funded by me. "We trusted you," they reportedly told my mom. "You lied to us." Amber, true to form, made it worse. "Well, maybe you shouldn't be so cheap," she snapped at them. "If you can't afford Monaco, that's not my fault." Ryan broke off the engagement on the spot. By the time they got back home, the damage was done. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. A week after they got back, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. I wasn't surprised. They'd always been persistent when it came to getting what they wanted. "Lauren, honey, please," Mom said through the door, her voice trembling. "We know we made mistakes. Just let us explain." Dad chimed in. "We can work this out. We're still family." I didn't answer. I sat on my couch, scrolling through my phone like they weren't even there. After about 20 minutes of knocking and pleading, they finally left. Later, my building manager told me they'd tried to convince him to let them in, claiming it was an emergency. He called me first, and I told him to send them packing. That night, I called Mia and invited her over for takeout. "You're famous, you know," she said, grinning as she scrolled through her phone. "Your post got shared in a bunch of family drama groups. People are calling you a hero for standing up to them." I laughed. "Great. That's all I need. Strangers rooting for me to ruin my family's life." "Ruin?" Mia raised an eyebrow. "They did this to themselves. You just stopped letting them walk all over you." She was right, of course. "Do you think they'll ever change?" I asked. Mia shook her head. "Probably not. But that's not your problem anymore." And she was right about that too. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought of me. I didn't care if they were sorry or if they ever realized how badly they'd treated me. I was done. I wasn't the forgotten, invisible kid anymore. I wasn't the scapegoat or the ATM. I was just Lauren, living my life. And that was enough. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up isn't learning to stand on your own. It's learning when to walk away.